Hey guys, Blake Whatley here. I was going to do a quick video on how to set up and use a Baitcaster or an open face reel for the beginner for the first time. Explain how to spool this reel up, what everything does on it, and set it up hopefully to minimize backlashes when you're learning starting out. Just to go over the parts or the components of the reel starting out. On the right side, your handle. It's fairly self-explanatory. You turn this, retrieves line in, it turns your spool. You got your drag star right inside of that. Your drag star turns normally with clicks. Some reels don't, some have them. If you turn this, pull this towards you, that's taking drag off the reel or lessening the amount of drag. You push this, roll this forward, you can go to full lock and that'll be full amount of drag. Drag is the amount of tension on the spool that it'll let line out. When a fish is fighting against you, keep you from breaking your line, to help fight the fish, wear the fish down. Inside of that is your spool tensioning knob, your course adjustment. It works the same way as the drag. You pull this back towards you, it takes tension off the spool. You roll this forward, it puts tension on the spool. That's the course adjustment to how free the spool will spin once you disengage it and you're ready to cast. Starting out, you'll want to set this a little tighter. It'll decrease your casting distance, but it will also decrease your backlashes. You basically got your reel seat, your footing, that goes into your rod, into the grooves. Tighten that down. I'm going to guess that's self-explanatory. Then you're going to have your side plate on the left side. This goes for right-handed reels is what I'm talking about here. Everything's the exact opposite with left-handed reels, but your side plate is either going to have some kind of turn key, maybe a little latch underneath. Some are going to have a screw. On some, I know like the Abus, there'll be maybe a piece up here that you have to pull from the side. It's across the level wind to release this. But these side plates are going to most always turn down or up to open up. On this Shimano, you just open this, turn that there, it's on a little spring, it just pops right down. As far as braking, two different types of braking systems on most reels. The Shimano is a centrifugal brake. You can see inside here, it's like a 6-star braking system. The little orange tabs on the brass ends are the brakes. Pressed in all the way to the center, they're off. You click those out. You do that, you can see, I'm going to hold it up close, you can see a little groove that you pull that up and it fits into the outer part. When that pink plastic is away, that brake is engaged. Starting out, for someone brand new, if you've got 6 stars here, I'd go ahead and pop out like 4 of these centrifugal brakes. Like I said, with the brakes, this is your fine adjustment on this side. Your spool tension knob is your coarse adjustment. But starting out brand new, you've never practiced with an open face or throwing an open face, I would set this to about 4, pull about 4 of these out. When you set these centrifugal brakes, you want to go the exact opposite. And what I mean by that, so if I've got 2 set, if we're looking at this like it's a clock, you want to set like 12 and 6. And it doesn't matter which ones, you can set 3 and 9 or whatever, but you want to do the opposite of the one you have set. If you've got 3 set, you want to piece that out where they're equally spaced, one in between. If you got 4, you want to do like 10 and 2 and 4 and 9. Enough on that. That's setting your fine brakes for a centrifugal brake. I'll show you what most other reels out on the market is a little simpler to adjust. You can adjust on the fly a lot easier. This is Daiwa's Mag Force. It's a magnetic braking system. If I can get real close, you can see this one the numbers are 1 to 10, some are 1 to 20, but basically with this, pretty self-explanatory. You can have your brake set at 1, or you can roll it all the way up to 10 to max. Starting out, same as with the centrifugal brake, if you have a reel that has a braking system designed like this, I would probably start out on 7 or 8, or crank it all the way to 10 to be safe. Like I said, all you're going to do with more breaks is decrease your casting distance, but it's going to help you to not backlash when you're learning. As you become more and more familiar, you'll get down to where you use very little breaks at all, because the third break that is not on the reel is this right here, your thumb. You're going to learn to use your thumb to really break this spool rotation and keep you from getting in a lot of trouble on certain casts. Okay, the next thing I was going to go over is how to spool your Baitcaster or open face reel. You take your typical spool of line. It's going to be important the way the line comes off this spool and goes onto the spool onto your reel. If you got your line like this, as you can see, this is rolling off the top of the spool as I pull it out. That's the way you want the line to come off of this spool onto your reel. You do not want the line to come off the bottom like this. If you have a spooling station, that's great. They work good. You don't have to. You can set this thing on the floor. You can put a number 2 pencil through it. Anything like that, hold it between your feet. That's what I do a lot of times. But either way, whether it's in front of you like this or on the floor, either way, I want that line rolling off the spool, off the top, coming at me from the top, not the bottom. Now, when I'm spooling this up on a reel, you have your reel like this. Obviously, you want to put your line through that level wind, which is the small hole in the front, the same thing that turns. And what that does when you turn this reel is it feeds that line on your spool evenly, so you don't have line build up on one side, and it'll cause problems. It'll feed onto the spool evenly as you spool your reel. Once you get your line in, you want to go under your spool. That's hard to show on camera, really tight camera work, but pretty simple. Go through that level wind, come down through, feed it around, and you want to tie it directly down to your spool. You can use whatever kind of knot you want. I mean, some people are going to tell you need to do this, need to do that. I mean, a simple double overhand knot's fine. You're never, hopefully, getting down to where you're fighting the fish on the knot you've tied onto the spool. Hopefully, you've got more line on your reel than that. But a simple double overhand knot's fine. If you want to do something else, that's fine also. Once you get it tied down, sometimes you'll want to give the line some slack as you start to spool it. You can't hold the line tight because it'll just slide on the spool sometimes. But anyways, once you get started, then you can reel on up. I personally, as far as filling a spool, I don't like to overfill a spool. Overfilling a spool is another pitfall for backlashes. If you look the side of your spool like that, now this reel, obviously, it doesn't really have quite enough on it. That's just kind of some backing that I've got down there. But if we take this one, for instance, that's about the amount of, if you look in there, that's about the amount of line I like to have on a spool at all times to fish with. So once I've got my line spooled on, make sure you go through each eye of your rod, running it out to your rod to the very end. Like I said, this is a beginner's video, so I'm not trying to make things seem harder than they are, but just explaining everything as if I was teaching it to my child. Okay, now I'm going to talk about real quick setting this reel up to be cast or thrown. And as a beginner, basically, like I've said at the first part of the video, we want to set this up with quite a bit of braking to try to minimize your backlashing early on. It's going to decrease your casting distance, but it's going to help you out to keep the reel from backlashing. When I say backlashing, I'm taking for assumption that you understand what I'm talking about, but what that is when you press your button to disengage your spool and have your spool free, when you cast that bait out, that spool's rolling at a high RPM. Well, when that bait hits the water, you throw in a kink back in the line if you do not stop this spool, and basically your spool is going to continue to roll real line out, and it's not going to have anywhere to go, and it's just going to, and it's going to blow up. Backlashes can be so bad that you have to cut them, especially if they're completely unchecked and that, you know, they're all blown up out of the reel like this. But anyways, getting to the settings, like I said, on course adjust, when I say I'd like this tighter than normal, the way we'll do this is if you have a lure tied on or a weight, we'll hold this weight out like this, and you press your button in, and you want to hold your thumb on the spool. Once you engage your button, your thumb is what's going to control the spool at that point. So when I let my thumb off, you see that bait just peels off pretty fast because I've got this set up pretty loose. I let my thumb off, it just peels off on its own with gravity. Engage my handle, that locks it, brings my bait back up. Starting out, we want to crank on that course adjust knob. See, I've got it so tight now that it won't peel off at all when I engage the button. So what I want to do is start taking that off just where the bait starts to fall on it. So about like that. You see that just peels off fairly slow. That means the spool is under a little bit of tension, which is what we want starting out. Then on the side, as I said before, either set your centrifugal brakes to like 4 out of the 6, or crank this up to about 7 or 8. And then the basic, I'll do another video on casting, overhand, sidearm cast, and so forth, 2-hand, 1-hand. But basically, to cast a Baitcaster, you engage that button, you've got your thumb on the spool. As you make your cast, you watch your lure. You have to let go of, it's like throwing a baseball. It's like learning to throw a ball. You have to know where to let go of it. If you let go too early, you're going high. If you let go too late, it's going in the ground. Same thing with a Baitcaster. That's why I prefer for beginners, as I taught my children, to sidearm cast. If you've got plenty of open space, if you let go a little early, you're going out that way. You let go late, you're going over here. But at least that way you're still flying out and you're not hitting the ground, or you're going straight up against gravity. Learning early on that overhand and let go too late and hit the ground, you just backlash that entire reel. You're probably going to be cutting it. But if you do the sidearm, whichever way it may be, when you learn, if you let go a little early, a little late, it's okay. I mean, always make sure there's no one out around you that you're going to hit when you're practicing, or if you're on the water, or on the bank, or in a boat. But that sidearm cast, let go. As your bait flies, you've got your eyes on your lure. Just before your lure hits the water, you're going to want to stop that spool with your thumb. Now, early on, it'll be kind of herky-jerky for you. As you're watching that lure, you'll it may still be this high off the water, and you'll stop it, and it'll hit the water hard and all that. That's all fine because you're learning and you're trying not to backlash. As you become more proficient with a bait casting reel, you'll be able to make that lure enter the water like an Olympic diver and just hardly any splash at all. You can learn other techniques such as pitching, skipping, lots of things you can do with a bait casting reel. But like I said, this is for beginners, and I'm setting you up as a beginner here to try to minimize your backlash and learn this with as little a headache as possible. Anyways, if you're set up like that, it's barely peeling off, you got your brakes turned up, go out there, you start practicing. Once you get that down a little bit, just start backing off on your brake. If it's this magnetic, back it off 1, maybe 2. If it's a centrifugal, go from 4 to 3, and you'll start seeing that you don't have to cast it near as hard. You get more distance, but you've got a lot more free spin on your spool, so you're playing with fire as a beginner. But you just work with it and practice, and it'll be okay. You'll learn to where you can throw this reel with minimal braking, get maximum distance out of your cast, and be proficient. It just takes practice, time on the water, or time in your yard. You can just tie a 1/2 ounce weight on here and go out and practice in the yard. One other tip to do: don't start out with super lightweight. Don't put on a 3/16 or a 1/16 ounce weight or something, or whatever you want to tie on to the end to practice. The heavier the weight, the better. I wouldn't do a 1 ounce to start out because that's like chunking a bomb. but like a half ounce would be good, 3/8 to a half ounce, and you can just practice in your yard. And once you get down with that, then you can start adjusting, working on heavier baits, lighter baits, and so on and so forth. Okay, one last thing I wanted to cover. If you're just getting into this in the beginning, you might be asking yourself, what gear ratio reel do I need or do I want starting out? There's basically, I'd categorize gear ratios and reels into three categories: slow, moderate or medium, and then high speed. Your slow reels are your 5-to-1s or variations of that, 4-9, 5.3-to-1, 5.2-to-1, anything in that range. Your medium speeds are going to be your 6s-to-1, 6.3-to-1 is traditionally the number. Your high speeds are anything 7 and above. I know they make all the way up to like a 9-to-1 now, but anything 7 and above is high speed. Generically, just an overview, high speed reels is what I would be using if I wanted a reel to Texas rig, fish a jig, something that is a hook setting technique is the way best way I can describe it. If it's something that you're feeling with and you're going to set the hook, because most of the time in a scenario like that, you're working the bait with your rod and not the reel, and you just want the reel to get the bait in and out fast. Medium speed reels like the 6-to-1, 6.3-to-1s, you can do everything with that reel. It really excels for me in spinner baits, bladed jigs, small crankbaits, medium running crankbaits. But you can do everything with that reel. It's probably the best all-around speed, and if I was just starting out and only going to buy one, that's what I would buy, is the 6.3-to-1 reel. The slower reels, basically I use only for deep cranks or slow rolling spinner baits or bladed jigs, something that I'm just going to be barely cranking the handle, or like with the big crankbaits, the slow speed reels give you a lot more power to really pull those plugs down through the water, and they don't wear you out. You would not want to throw a deep diving crankbait on a 8-to-1 reel. Some people do. I understand that, but for a beginner, it's not what I would recommend.